Good morning and welcome back to the Football Tribe UG channel. Robert K. Sakos is your usual suspect. Welcome back to yet another live broadcast on your favorite football updates channel. That's at Football Tribe UG. We do come to you live right from the heart of Uganda in Kampala. Uganda's capital, Kampala. And it's a pleasure to be back with you once again this morning to discuss, the latest from the world of sport. Things are boiling up, things are heating up, especially in as far as the transfer market is concerned. Uh, some bit of disappointing news depending on where you sit, while other news will be sort of refreshing to hear. So meanwhile, allow me have do the usual honors of having our audios tested before we get in the thick of this morning's conversation, because there has been a twist, an apparent twist in the tale of Victor Osimhen as he seeks a move away from AC Napoli. It's one we did discuss about last night, but looks like there is more for us to look at in that regard, and we'll be discussing that and a lot more. We will also talk about the FIFA Club World Cup, because yesterday we did confirm those who will be playing in the finals as things stand, and that will be Chelsea. They will be meeting PSG after PSG sort of embarrassed. That's, if I'm being kind with my words, they embarrassed Real Madrid with that 4-0 thumping at the MetLife Stadium in New Jersey. So we'll be sort of digesting that a little more. That result, of course, it's one we did a look at last night as well. We were following the updates from that game, and nonetheless, we still have an opportunity to look at it further in terms of the statistics, how things really look like. Were Real Madrid that bad, or PSG were that good, depending on what lenses you do wear. And maybe that's where we should start our conversation from, because at one point it really did look pretty. Anyways, then we'll also get to discuss the latest from the world of transfers in terms of transfer gossip, speculation, done deals, deals on the verge of completion, deals that could collapse, deals that are being frustrated, and things of that nature, because there is a lot going on from the world of transfers as we speak. But on that note, therefore, I wish to say thank you to all those that managed to catch yesterday's live broadcast. Thank you so much, Kickboxing. Thank you so much, Peter Parker. Thank you so much, Cedric. Thank you so much, MD Ike, and every single one of you that was able to join us. Mariam Nalmansi, the Liverpool fan, it was a pleasure to have you on that broadcast from last night. Thank you to all those that have gone ahead to check out our content. That's under the videos section, the short section, people that constantly look out for pieces of content here and there and do watch it. Thank you so much. We can't say thank you enough, but we do not take your love and support for granted. So just waiting on you guys for the rest of you to join this morning's podcast, so that we can get the conversation going. In as far as today's morning broadcast. It's a Thursday morning. It's a bit chilly out there. It's a bit cloudy down here in Uganda. I do not know what it is looking like for you guys on your end, but yeah, that's what we are experiencing this morning. Then I do not know, but perhaps we'll get to discuss things that are happening at Man United and where their hope lies. A lot is being said about Rodrigo Goes. Should we start from there? Again, we'll wait to see, because things are really happening. Bournemouth are growing in their confidence of signing the Chelsea goalkeeper. Rodrigo's future, that's Rodrigo Goes at Real Madrid, is going to be discussed in the coming days. So plenty for us to discuss this morning. But Anyways, it's 5 minutes into the broadcast, so we will go with those that are available to get going with us, and we will start our conversation from there. Anyways, so like I said, we will kick off things with that semi-final humiliation of Real Madrid at the hands of Paris Saint-Germain. Now, this is the second Spanish La Liga team that PSG have put to the sword in the same competition, beating them by 4 goals to 0. The first culprit was Atletico de Madrid on match day one of the ongoing FIFA Club World Cup that does climax on Sunday when Chelsea meet PSG in the finals. So yesterday it was another humiliation for Real Madrid or for another Madrid side as PSG beat Real Madrid by 4 goals to 0. At some point, I think that was possibly was it after the uh, first half cooling break. At one point, PSG had an 80% ball possession, but overall they managed a 68% ball possession. That's according to live score statistics, while 32% fell to Real Madrid. On shots on target, PSG had 8, Real Madrid only had 2. Shots off target were 5 for PSG and 2 for Real Madrid. So that clearly tells you the bit of dominance that PSG had in this game. Shots blocked, PSG only blocked 3, while Real Madrid had to block up to 7. In that regard, 4 offsides, of course, for PSG and 0 for Real Madrid. Corner kicks were yes, sorry, yes, corner kicks were 3-5. That's sorry, 3-6 in favor of Real Madrid. But I mean, it was that kind of game where PSG dominated from the onset because only 5 minutes in, and Thibaut Courtois had already been forced into 2 immaculate saves, and no wonder he did survive the next earliest opportunity because Fabian Ruiz has scored to make it to give PSG the lead. That was in as early as the 6th minute of the game. A fumbled ball, I think, by Raul Asensio in that centre back. As he tried to look up and see who he plays the pass to, Ousmane Dembele steals the ball and passes it to Fabian Ruiz, who was possibly my man of the match in yesterday's game. And he scored to make it 1-0. Only 3 minutes later, PSG found themselves in a two goal lead after Antonio Rudiger was attempting a pass, I think, back to Thibaut Courtois, but that pass fell short before Ousmane Dembele lashed onto it to go ahead and slot that ball beyond the reach of the towering Belgian goalkeeper in Thibaut Courtois. So it was 2-0. And then in the 24th minute, Fabian Ruiz was once again on target with Achraf Hakimi providing the assist to make it 3-0, while Goncalo Ramos, that's the Portuguese international, came off the bench to score in the 87th minute with Bradley Barcola providing the assist. Now, when you look at those goals, they're easy to read out. But when you look at 2 of the goals were defensive errors from Real Madrid. That was Raul Asensio and Antonio Rudiger being the culprits. Then for example, the fourth goal, it was just the immaculate dribbling skills of Bradley Barcola, who managed to beat his opponents inside the area and then pass that ball to Goncalo Ramos before he scored. So overall, you feel that Real Madrid fell short, especially in their defensive duties. Two, that midfield was being penetrated so often. I think maybe partly because of the absence of Fede Valverde, because he was being played at right back in the absence of Alexander Trent-Arnold, and then because he did not want to leave that zone and try and slot into the midfield because he knew what the danger was going to be when Kivisa Kvaratskhelia was running a team, so which he oftentimes did. Not that he was very successful at it, but yeah, Kivisa Kvaratskhelia also missed, I think, 2 opportunities in that game. So Thibaut Courtois doing everything to save Real Madrid to ensure, excuse me, to ensure that the result did not get worse than it actually got eventually. Then on the other side, that was Gianluigi Donnarumma. He was called on to the occasion about, I think, 2 or 3 times in the course of the game. But PSG's midfield were simply dominant. The attacking three, Ousmane Dembele, Kivicha Kvaratskhelia, and Desiree Doué, were very impressive with their counter press, winning the ball back. And again, we see that particular incident in the second goal that was scored. That goal scored by Ousmane Dembele, because he practically forces Antonio Rudiger into an error before he goes on to score. So you could see Xabi Alonso telling his players on the touchline after they had conceded the second goal to calm down. But the first attempt of the game, in as early as I think the 3rd minute, was from Achraf Hakimi, if I'm not mistaken, who forced Thibaut Courtois into a save. Cristiano Sam, hi, hello my brother, how are you doing? I'm personally good on this side. How are you doing? That side. I hope you're good. Thank you for joining us this morning. So then I think I do not remember. Was it Ousmane Dembele or for whom that second opportunity fell to, as you know, PSG tried to get the lead. That was in around the 4th minute of the game. And again, Achraf Hakimi involved in that build-up to that moment, and that pass by Desiree Doué. It was basically a backheel pass into the path of Achraf Hakimi. So I think it was Nuno Mendes that was latching onto that ball. I think it was Nuno Mendes that was latching onto that ball in the forbidden area to force Thibaut Courtois into a save. So very, very impressive display from PSG. Luis Enrique must be really, really impressed. At the other time, when they knocked out Bayern Munich, beating them by 2-0, even though it took them a bit of time to score, that was in the 78th minute, and in the 96th minute, thanks to Ousmane Dembele. Dembele gonna win the Ballon d'Or this season. By the way, yes, he could win it, although the more you look at that PSG team, the more you get thinking to yourself, and you're like, maybe even Vitinha could win it. I mean, we're talking about a player that is just won the UEFA Nations League with Portugal during that international break. And Nuno Mendes, I mean, they've won the quadruple. That was Coupe de France. Then the French sort of format of the Super Cup. They've won the UEFA Champions League. They've won the French League One title, and now they are into the finals of the UEFA of the FIFA Club World Cup. Really, so you look at that, and I mean, it's just that. So I do not want to disagree with you that Dembele could win the Ballon d'Or, but if you are to look at that PSG team with an even bigger lens, you could. There's so many players that you could pull out that you would think would deserve this overall, because they've been quite impressive, both at club level and on at the international team. And for me personally, Nuno Mendes is one of those guys, as well as Vitinha. So, but PSG's counter press is so frustrating, because when Ousmane Dembele steals that ball from Raul Asensio, he forces Thibaut Courtois into committing a foul, which easily was going to be a penalty from the referee. But because the referee chose to play the advantage, and the ball, of course, falls in the laps of Fabian Ruiz before he goes on to score. You say Vitinha is underrated. He performs good in all matches, but does not get the recognition. Yes, I certainly do agree with you that sometimes maybe some of these players are not given for their individual quality, are not given the flowers that they do deserve. And the other player I wanted to highlight is Fabian Ruiz. I mean, he's so effective in that role, because in this whole PSG team, the way they set up with Vitinha, João Neves, and Fabian Ruiz. He sort of plays the de facto role of being the creative midfielder or being the sort of number 10 kind of player that you would have. And he, when it comes to going back and forth, he just does that so well. The way he finds himself in the box, the way he scored those goals yesterday, you cannot fault him really. And yet, Vitinha, when it comes to winning the ball back, when it comes to dictating the tempo of the game, when it comes to guiding the entire team forward, you can't really take anything away from him. João Neves, the way he complements Vitinha in that midfield, at one point he committed a professional foul as Real Madrid tried to get themselves into a counter-attack. And really, overall, the entire PSG team is just immaculate. They're just impressive. You look at, because we're talking, in one of those games, by the way, I think, was it at the round of 16 or during the group stages when João Neves scored a brace in a game? And it's easy for us to sort of forget that because of how impressive. I think, was it against, no, it wasn't against, Atletico, because against Atletico, Fabian Ruiz scored, Vitinha scored, Mayuru and Likang in scored a penalty in that game. But you say, brother, do you think Rodrigo Goes is going to leave Real Madrid? Where would he go? Let's discuss Rodrigo in just a bit. Kindly indulge me on this one as we conclude on PSG. But so because of the effectiveness of that team, I mean, you forget that because by the way, in this tournament, Botafogo are the only team that are beaten up against PSG. That was on match day 2. They beat them by a goal to nil. And then we came in that game against Seattle Sounders. Yes. Then you had Kivisha Kvaratskhelia and Achraf Hakimi shine in that game. So I think it was at the round of 16 where we had that impressive performance from what's his name? From João Neves. I stand to be corrected against Inter Miami, where he had a very, very impressive game. Yes, it was against Inter Miami. He scored a brace in that game, as well as Achraf Hakimi. Now, because, and we were talking about this yesterday, that because Achraf Hakimi scores more goals than Nuno Mendes and provides more assists probably, it's easy to look at that and say Achraf Hakimi is a better or a more effective player as compared to Nuno Mendes. But they are equally just as talented. They are equally as just impressive. So, congratulations, Team PSG. You do reach the finals there, in which you play Chelsea on Sunday. That game will be coming at 10 p.m. East African time. Then, to answer your question, Cristiano Sam, about Rodrigo Goes, is that Rodrigo Goes' future will be discussed in the course of next week. And this is according to Fabrizio Romano, who said Real Madrid and Rodrigo Goes' camp will discuss about his future from next week. Decision will be up to Rodrigo, as Real Madrid are open to accept exit if the player decides to leave. He adds on to say that Rodrigo has not made Real Madrid the starting 11 at the Club World Cup for 5 consecutive games, so that probably may speak to what? Because I think he featured in the first game, the match day 2 and 3, then the round of 16 and the quarterfinals, as well as the semifinals. He didn't get to start. He only came off the bench, I think, in one of the games, and then all the other 3 he did not even feature. So entirely, so really, that could perhaps speak maybe. And we're just reading into this. We're only thinking that maybe it frustrates him a bit to see that the likes of Adagula are playing ahead of him. Of course, Kylian Mbappe will always play ahead of him. Excuse me, I don't know why I'm doing this morning, but anyways, consider that mental fatigue. But and where he will go, a lot of clubs will be interested. Chelsea, Arsenal, Liverpool is one of the teams that have apparently would consider signing Rodrigo Goes But yesterday, in the aftermath of the game, when Xabi Alonso was speaking about Rodrigo Goes, he said his decision was basically technical. It has nothing to do with the player's future. So he thought that we thought we would be better off with other players. Basically, that's how Xabi Alonso would put it. So basically, when he says that we would be better off with other players, that means we are not better off with Rodrigo Goes in that kind of setup, technically and tactically. So it's increasingly likely that Rodrigo Goes will leave Real Madrid. Where he will play, that remains a huge question, because while all those three teams that are mentioned and some Saudi Pro League clubs are interested, none of them have gone up to speak to Real Madrid themselves to say, look, we are interested in signing Rodrigo Goes. Arsenal made inquiries in May, but that was with the players' camp. So Andrea Bata made those inquiries. So again, let's wait and see how everything will sort of progress in that Rodrigo Goes, ongoing story. Then quickly, I want us to look at the story of Victor Osimhen. Now, Victor Osimhen, we all know that would want to return to Galatasaray, and that's where he wants to play. And he has already agreed to personal terms on a 3-year contract. Now, apparently, and this is speculation, but apparently, Napoli have turned down, Galatasaray's 75 million euro fee, which is essentially the player's release clause, because they are trying to possibly frustrate the player intentionally to try and force him to go and play in the Saudi Pro League, where there's interest from Al Hilal. We all know about Al Hilal's interest in Victor Osimhen, and the reason for that is because Al Hilal guaranteed more upfront money as compared to Galatasaray. Yesterday we spoke about Galatasaray, that finally they had opened up to the willingness of paying the 75 million euro release clause, and if you're going to put him on 15 million euros per season on a 3-year contract, basically that's 45 million euros, in which rises the transfer fee or overall spend on the player in the excess of 130 million euros in that kind of region. But essentially, when they sort of signaled that they would be willing to pay 75 million euro release clause, their payment structure that they are trying to demand from AC Napoli is not as favorable as that of Al Hilal, when they had agreed to pay the 75 million euro release clause to Napoli. Remember, Napoli also need the money because they want to sign Darwin Núñez from Liverpool, and are also trying to renew their interest in signing Alejandro Garnacho from Manchester United. So because of the payment structure, Galatasaray want to pay the 75 million euros over a course of 7 or 5 years. So if you are to spread those payments over a course of 5 years, basically they would be paying about what? About I think I need a calculator for this one. If we are to get things right, we're simply looking at the averages. What that would be 75 divided by 5, basically 15 million euros per year. That's what they are looking to pay Napoli, and possibly Napoli are not really eager on that kind of payment structure. But those are the reports that we are getting this morning, that Napoli are trying to frustrate Victor Osimhen's move to Galatasaray and try and force him into the direction of Hilal. Now, something similar has happened before. You remember in 2023 when Arsenal were trying to push to sign Mikhailo Modric, one Chelsea came offering better money, but also better payment terms, in terms of money upfront, in terms of unexpected add-ons. They were more realistic in their numbers that they offered, and while the player had been shown all sorts of interest in joining Arsenal, praising the manager Mikel Arteta, praised Roberto Di Zerbi, because I think Arsenal played the game against Brighton in one of those fixtures before he made the move, and things of that nature. So everything is pointed to one direction, that wanted to join Arsenal, but because Chelsea offered better paying terms and better, achievable add-ons, they forced Shakhtar Donetsk forced the player basically really to accept move to Chelsea over Arsenal, and that's how Arsenal ended up signing Leandro Trossard from Brighton and Hove Albion for about £27 million in January 2023. So practically, that's what Napoli are trying to do with Victor Osimhen. He has already made it very clear that he is that going to Al Hilal is not possible. He wants Galatasaray. He's also told the club he won't be returning for pre-season and doesn't want to play for Napoli anymore. And this is what I was speaking about the other day, that as much as Napoli would want to play hardball on this one, their relationship with the player is already so solid that it's almost remotely unthinkable to say that you could return back in the fold to play for Napoli. So that's how bad, or that's how soiled the relationship between the player and the club is, and yet the club are trying to frustrate his move as well. Now, it's not an easy decision to make, especially when you have somebody willing to give you a better offer. And I usually keep saying, talking about this or using this example. Imagine you're buying a car, then your brother or sister wants to buy it for the same amount that a stranger is willing to buy it for. However, the stranger is offering you better paying terms in terms of the installments or the fees upfront as compared to your brother and sister. So basically, that's the conundrum. In this case, maybe for you it will be easier to say, I'll sell to my brother or my sister because they are my brother or sister. But in this case, Napoli has no brother or sister. All they have is a stranger in Al Hilal who is willing to offer better paying terms, and then they have Galatasaray who would pass for a sister or brother who has weaker payment terms, but at the end of the transaction, when it's concluded, in whatever time it is finally concluded, they will all have paid the same amount of money for the same car. So, and Victor Osimhen is practically saying, I do not want to go to the stranger, that's Al Hilal. I want to go to the sister slash brother in Galatasaray. But the brother's payment terms are not favorable to you, the selling individual. So that's the picture I can paint for you in regards to the situation with Napoli and Victor Osimhen. But we'll keep monitoring that situation and see how things do progress on that front. Then quickly, let's go to more contentious issues. Now, again, the story of Noni Madueke. If you want to hear more of my thoughts about Noni Madueke and why I do not think that Arsenal fans are justified in their criticism of the player, please go under the video section on the YouTube, on the channel, and check out my submission, because we need a full video on that one to say, look here, guys, this is the thing, this is what happens, because it's not really about the player, it's about the club's decision and whether you do agree with that decision. Of course, majority Arsenal fans do not agree with that decision, but that because that video came in the wake of Arsenal agreeing to personal terms with Noni Madueke, and Arsenal fans are in disarray. Many have not changed their stance, but I've seen some say, if we do sign him, if that's what the club wants, then we will back him. Others have gone on to send him saying, do not come to our club, and things of that nature. First of all, the biggest contentious issue in this debate is one that is only guided by emotions. That is the idea of criticizing Noni Madueke, not because of his individuality as a player, but because of where he's coming from. Arsenal fans think there's an obsession of Arsenal signing Chelsea players, many of whom that have not delivered upon being signed, even though that could be a bit debatable. So, because for me personally, I think Kai Havertz has delivered more than he did for Chelsea. So could £65 million have been better spent on another player? The question would have been who. But also, what were Arsenal trying to achieve in that transfer? Of course, Mikel Arteta then told us he was getting himself a midfielder it's not turned out that way. He's proved to be a better forward than he is a midfielder. But let's wait and see. Then Petchek, back in 2015 when he joined Arsenal, I thought he went on to have a good Arsenal career, but his poor performance in the finals of the 2019 Europa League final in Baku, Azerbaijan. Then you look at Jorginho. I do not think he's done anything wrong ever since joining Arsenal. That was in 2022. I think he joined. No, actually, he joined in January of 2023. I think around the same time with Leandro Trossard. I stand to be corrected, but that's as far as I can remember. Then you look at, of course, you go back to the calamities of William Bogeste Silva, Raheem Sterling in recent times. Those are the two that are mostly criticized or cited. David Luiz, for me, was a 50-50 given the timing when he joined the club and things of that nature. So most Arsenal fans are, okay, not most, but majority of Arsenal fans who are opposed to this kind of transfer of Noni Madueke from Chelsea to Arsenal are simply opposed to it because the player is coming in from Chelsea, but nothing to do with the qualities of the player. When we break it down to the qualities of player, one, for starters, he will be coming in as a backup for Bukayo Saka. And for long, we all know Arsenal fans have demanded for a backup for Bukayo Saka because he just plays one too many games and he needs that support structure. Last season, he suffered that 3 months hamstring injury that required surgery. So you need a backup. Is Noni Madueke a good player? He's not an exceptional player. He is a very good player, one that is still developing. And because having scored 13 goals and provided 5 assists in 67, apologies on that internet glitch. We've had one too many of those in recent days, but it's becoming a habit these days. Anyways, so that's the situation with Noni Madueke, but Arsenal have since they already agreed to personal terms with the player days ago, and now yesterday they made official contact with Chelsea for club-to-club negotiations. Now it is believed that Chelsea want a fee in the excess of £50 million as guaranteed fees, using the deal of Anthony Elanga from Nottingham Forest to Newcastle as the benchmark to set their price. I do not think Noni Madueke has posted the kinds of numbers that Anthony Elanga has been able to post for Nottingham Forest in the last couple of seasons at Nottingham Forest, because he joined them two seasons ago for Man United in a deal worth about £15 million. So I do not think that Noni Madueke has posted those kinds of statistics. For example, Anthony Elanga had a 17-goal involvement last season, 6 goals and 11 assists, and Noni Madueke doesn't have those numbers. In his debut season with Nottingham Forest, he scored 5 goals and provided 9 assists. Again, that was a 14-goal involvement, which that means he's been improving and still only 23 years of age. Well, yet when you look at Noni Madueke, the chart is quite different in regards to his in regards to his Chelsea career. Last season, he had a 10-goal involvement in 32 appearances, scored 7 goals and provided 3 assists. Then, of course, having joined Chelsea in January 2023, that first campaign or half season, he made 12 appearances and only scored 1 goal. Then his first full season, 2023-2024, he scored 5 goals and provided 2 assists. That's a 7-goal involvement. Now, again, when you look at that chart, or kind of chart, it shows a bit signs of progress, although you think that the player can do more. That's why I believe that with better coaching, he could turn out to be a very decent backup for Bukayo Saka, because we all know he's not going to start ahead of Bukayo Saka. Maybe when it comes to cup competitions, like an FA Cup game or a Carabao Cup game, if you're playing against Plymouth Argyle, or if you're playing against a Sheffield Wednesday, and that kind of thing, he could start ahead of Bukayo Saka to give Bukayo Saka a rest. So, but Arsenal fans, do let me know what your thoughts are on your pursuit for Noni Madueke. Do you equally share similar sentiments? As Zero Rukram says, what are the results of the conversation between Rodrigo Goes and Liverpool. That's something we had spoken about before, but just to rewind back to it a bit, is that there is no formal talk so far in regards to Rodrigo Goes and Liverpool. To the best of my knowledge, what I do know is that the name has been suggested to Liverpool in the wake of the whole news surrounding Luis Diaz, and we've spoken about Luis Diaz's situation. Now, Liverpool have so far turned down two attempts from Barcelona and Bayern Munich to try and sign the 28-year-old Colombian international. Now, according to reports from Colombia, what we are getting is that the player has apparently, and this is, I must add that it is apparent, that apparently he's informed Liverpool that they should entertain contract renewal talks with him over an improved, contract. Otherwise, they should consider letting him go. Now, he is not saying he doesn't want to be at Liverpool. He's simply saying, look, there's interest from Barcelona, there's interest from Bayern Munich, and we all know his dream move will be Barcelona, according to reports. But you know what happens with players. Today it could be Barcelona, and yet when Bayern Munich come with a better deal or offer in terms of a contract, it's like, to hell with the dream, let me go play for Bayern Munich. After all, they are equally as big a club. So there's that's the bit of situation. So that's what we are getting. Now, because we also know about the interest from Al Nassr, although Al Nassr have not formally approached Liverpool to try and sign him. Now, he has 2 years left to his current contract, and Liverpool have not engaged him in any contract renewal talks whatsoever. So he's basically saying, Liverpool, I would be okay to stay. I would love to stay, but just give me an improved offer. Otherwise, let me go because I'm 28. In a season's time, I'll be only left with 1 year left on my contract. But Liverpool do not want to sell Luis Diaz. But we can never say never. Money speaks at the end of the day, because you never know. We could wake up one morning and suddenly Liverpool are entertaining bids for Luis Diaz because they've identified the perfect option for replacements for Luis Diaz. Last summer, they almost signed Anthony Gordon, who they are still interested in. That's Anthony Gordon from Newcastle. So I do not know, but I would want to believe that Anthony Gordon is even above Rodrigo Goes in the pecking order for Liverpool's pursuits. There, should they want to, add a number to that. We all know that they want to sign a left winger, but also want to sign a striker. But the situation with the striker is dependent on them moving on Darwin Núñez to who is attracting interest to Napoli, and those two are into negotiations. So we know that Liverpool want a very significant transfer fee for Darwin Núñez. I'm not sure Napoli are rich enough to kind of meet those demands, but let's just wait and see. You say Diaz's agreement is he is free to go for 80 million pounds and above. Well, nobody is offering 80 million pounds at this stage because Barcelona are certainly not going to pay that. Or if they are willing to pay that, then it's going to be on some form of long-term strategy where they pay you in as many installments as they can afford to. Because look, when they were interested in signing, Nico Williams, the release clause was only 58 million euros. And I can tell you for a fact that I do believe, without an ounce of doubt, that Barcelona could not afford paying 58 million euros in one go. They were looking to negotiate that. But because Athletic Bilbao sort of beat them to the punchline for a relationship and went and asked La Liga whether Barcelona were capable of signing Nico Williams and then register him while remaining compliant with the financial fair play rules. That sort of communicated to Barcelona that those guys are not willing to negotiate on their release clause. All they want is, if you want the player, pay it in one go. So that situation went as sour as quickly as possible before even the clubs would talk. And Nico Williams ended up committing his future to Athletic Bilbao until June 2035. Now, you say Bayern offered 70 million. Barca wants a bit part, a squad player, not a first team player. So they want Rashford or not. Again, Barcelona's priority was signaled that it was Luis Diaz. Now, you see, the thing about Barca players is that if you go and prove yourself in those training sessions, you could eventually become the number one, because we all know that football is as much as about talent as it is about form. Because you could be well talented, but if you're off form, then the backup player is going to take your place, because that's how big teams operate. That's how competitive teams be. You know, if you're Leroy Sané at Bayern Munich and suddenly you're off form and Kingsley Coman is getting things done, then he will start ahead of you. So that's how basically how it works. But Barcelona told the world that Luis Diaz and Rashford were the priority, and that they had sort of given up on their pursuit for Nico Williams when they failed to get him last summer. Now, they tried to come back in, but that has just not worked out, because I do not think Barcelona have the money. Only Deco wants Diaz. I do not think it's only Deco that wants Diaz, because we're talking about the sporting director. He must be speaking to his manager in Hansi Flick to say, these are the options that we have for the player, because usually this is how it works. A manager like Hansi Flick will tell Barcelona that, look, we need reinforcements. I need a striker, I need a winger, I need a centre back, I need a midfielder. So who fits this kind of mold? Then the sporting director, along with the rest of the technical team, the analytics team, will go out in the market and identify candidates and come up with a 3 to 4. Apologies for that internet glitch. It's one we will be facing for now. That's the third or fourth time during one of our broadcasts. So I'm still explaining the situation. So they bring the manager options and say, these are the options. Sometimes the manager will play a part in submitting options to say, the player I want for this role is so and so. Usually they will have an input. So, and then they will grade those players to say, this is our primary target. Should we fail? This is plan B, this is plan C, this is plan D. So basically that's how it works. So it's not like Deco is working in isolation to say, I will just go out and sign that player. Even at Real Madrid, where they sign players and tell the manager or head coach to use them, sometimes they also encourage managers to go out and sign players that managers really, really want. For example, Xabi Alonso told Real Madrid to fast track the signing of Dean Howson from FC Bournemouth, and they did that. He's pushing for Alvaro Carreras, the left back from Benfica, to get that deal over the line. And we know he wants a midfielder. He's asked for a midfielder, and previously they've discussed names like Angelo Stiller from Stuttgart. So that's the composition of it. So it's not like Deco says, I want this one, and then somehow maybe Hans Flick says we should get Rashford, then maybe the Barcelona president Joan Laporta is saying, no, we ought to get Nico Williams. I do not want to believe that's the situation. You say okay, you say Rashford is as far from the quality of Barcelona first 11 as it comes. He is not anywhere close to challenging Rafinha or Robert Lewandowski. Now, I do not think that Marcus Rashford will be rivaling Robert Lewandowski, because even at the age of 36 years already, he is still posting the goals. I think he scored 25 goals in La Liga last season. That's the Polish international. Then Rafinha, I think we can all agree that Rafinha was Barcelona's best player last season, without a doubt. So he is in that great of form that Marcus Rashford is not going to knock him out of of the team. That I would want to agree with you. However, like I said, we could go into next season and then suddenly Rafinha struggles for form. We've seen these things before. Where a player shines this season and then the subsequent season, he goes, all his entire form goes up in smoke. The perfect example for us to use in this particular case is the Marcus Rashford himself. You remember before he got awarded with that long-term lucrative contract at Manchester United in Erik ten Hag's debut campaign, he scored 30 goals across all competitions. That's how impressive he was, and he got that big deal. But then the subsequent season, he wasn't the same player. Last season, we know for a fact he wasn't the same player. That's how he ended up going out on loan to Aston Villa. So really, I do not want to see things can change. Things can change. A player can wake up and just struggle. We could easily go into next season, not that I wish it on him, and suddenly things are not happening for Lamine Yamal as they had been happening for the previous season. Then you say that is false. Xabi Alonso will never stab Liverpool in the back by signing a Trent. Real make signings as wanted by Perez. Now, again, Xabi Alonso did not go to Liverpool to say we want Alexander Trent-Arnold, and I did not say that, unless you're misquoting me on this one. I said he asked Real Madrid to fast track the signing of Dean Howson from Bournemouth, and that's how Real Madrid quickly agreed to pay his £50 million release clause that is payable over 3 installments. Then he told them they should bring in Alvaro Carreras from Benfica, and then he wants a midfielder. And among the considerations, and I'm not saying he's the one that they're going to sign, is Angelo Stiller. Now, in terms of Real Madrid signing players that they want to sign, the perfect example is a player like Kylian Mbappe. It doesn't matter who the manager is. The club wants to sign Kylian Mbappe. He is there, use him. Then the other player is Alexander Trent-Arnold. Now, Alexander Trent-Arnold is a player that Real Madrid identified over a year ago, and they were destined to sign him, whether it was Xabi Alonso walking into the door, whether it was Carlo Ancelotti staying, whether it was any other manager that would have walked into those doors at the Santiago Bernabeu. Yes, so Florentino Perez does make those signings where they go into the market, identify a young talent, and bring him. I can tell you for a fact that Carlo Ancelotti did not tell Florentino Perez to go out and sign a player like Enrique. He did not, but they bought him. So they bring these young players, these very, very good young players, and tell you, use them, to the best of their abilities. Adagula, who's struggled for enough playing time under Carlo Ancelotti, is another example of that kind of signing. And when you rewind things back, when Real Madrid were signing his ex-son Leite Kaka, and when they were signing Asia Iraramendi, it was not because managers were asking for those players, because Real Madrid as Galacticos look at themselves as the destination for big players, for brilliant players. So because they look at themselves as such, they just go out in the market and say, we're going to identify a player maybe like Bukayo Saka and sign him. We're going to identify a player like William Saliba and sign him. So it does not really entirely fall on the manager to say, that's the player I want. Sometimes managers or head coaches have an input on who they sign, but overall, it begins with the president and the rest of the technical team in regards to who Real Madrid sign or do not sign. And again, you go back to when they let go of Mesut Ozil. I do know for a fact that then the manager did not approve. I think Jose Mourinho was still at the club. I think he was leaving that summer to return to Chelsea at the end of the 2012-2013 season. Then the season after, that is after winning the UEFA Champions League in 2014, they sold Angelo Di Maria to Manchester United. Again, it was not the manager's decision. Carlo Ancelotti was there. And then you remember them moving on Gonzalo Higuain. But I think there they simply made the decision to retain one striker in Karim Benzema to be alongside Cristiano Ronaldo. So usually it's not the manager that makes most of the decisions. So then you said Xabi Alonso Xabi Alonso determined the signing. That is mostly false. I'm not saying Xabi Alonso determines. I'm saying if you're a head coach at a team like Real Madrid, you're going to have an input, but that input is small. The other club I can give you is Chelsea. Chelsea, in the last couple of years, have been signing players not because managers want them. They simply went out in the market, identified good players, and signed them. During those managerial changes, from Thomas Tuchel to Graham Potter to, of course, the interim Frank Lampard to Mauricio Pochettino and now Enzo Maresca. It's not that Enzo Maresca goes out and says, bring 1, 2, 3, 4 players. No, just identifying good players in the market, and they say, telling to the manager, we want to be the best team, make these players work. Basically, that's what they've been doing. So it's not like, I think it was Graham Potter in the role at the time. It's not like Graham Potter was really clamoring for the signing of Mohammad Kudus. It was the club's decision, you know. So it's not Xabi Alonso determining every signing walking into the doors of Real Madrid. But as a new head coach, he is having an input to say, these are the positions we have to strengthen, and these are the options of players that we should be looking at, you know. But I've explained the situation with Alexander Trent-Arnold. He had zero input whatsoever in that one as well. So he just has to make certain players work. And while he was, I've given you the examples of the players that he's asked the club to fast track and sign. Then Jose Perez wants Ibrahim Konate. He wants Trent. Now, the situation with Ibrahim Konate is similar to the way Real Madrid ended up signing Alexander Trent-Arnold. How? Is that they knew the player's contract situation and they started pursuing him. That's how the player ended up not renewing a contract, even though he had a contract offer from Liverpool. Now, Ibrahim Konate, we all know, has 1 year left to his current contract, which year he has already entered. Now, apparently, he's turned down contract offers from Liverpool, or they failed to agree to terms. Now, Real Madrid are on the other side in waiting, and I would want to assume they've already spoken to the players' camp to say, look, you can see out the remainder of your contract and join us next summer. And was discussing that same situation, I think, a couple of days, if not a week or so back, and I was saying, Liverpool have to make a hard decision to either sell Ibrahim Konate this transfer window and not lose him for free, or and go in the market and sign two centre backs, because they also need to replace Joel Quencher, who was a backup player in that defense. Else, they'll have to go and speak to Crystal Palace's Mark Graham and say, look here, you stay at Crystal Palace and see out the remainder of your contract. We'll bet you on a free transfer next summer, because we're going to be losing Ibrahim Konate on a free transfer. So that means you're going to be guaranteed playing time. You walk straight into the team, you know. So there's that kind of situation, because Real Madrid use their big name, their big brand name, to lure players away, to sort of tell players not to renew contracts, because they promise them, you know, come and be a Galactico, come and, you know, be part of a big team. And they also have the financial resources to pay these players huge sign-on fees or bonuses when they join as free agents. So there's also that. We cannot really ignore that situation as well. So essentially, that is what is happening around Liverpool. That is what is happening with those situations. I think that brought us right from the Rodrigo Goes conversation and Luis Diaz and things of that nature. But let's not rule out the possibility of Liverpool making a firm move for either Rodrigo Goes or Anthony Gordon in this transfer window. The exit of Luis Diaz, I wouldn't really entirely rule it out, even though Liverpool wouldn't want to sell. Because at the end of the day, money talks. Money talks. Suddenly, if an interesting or an undeniable offer comes to Liverpool's table, I'm sure they'll look at, they will assess their situation and say, look here, he's a very impressive player, but we also have Cody Gakpo, you know. But let's not forget, we're talking about the Liverpool side that unfortunately lost Diego Jota in a car accident. So they must find a player in the market to replace Diego Jota, you know. And maybe if Luis Diaz leaves, it may mean Federico Chiesa staying at the club. We all know that the new Italian national team manager, head coach in Gennaro Gattuso, has told Federico Chiesa, if you want to be part of our plans for the FIFA Club World Cup, then you must get playing time. And in as far as playing time is concerned, he's not going to get, a lot of that at Liverpool when he's behind the pecking order of all those attacking players that are within Liverpool's ranks. So let's wait and see. Then you say, why Napoli willing to pay 45 for an overly high player in Garnacho, but only 50 for Darwin Núñez? Now, Darwin Núñez is 26 years of age. The player he promised to be when he was coming from Benfica to join Liverpool was that 2022. He's not been really that player. When you look at his numbers, I do not think they are the numbers that you look at and say we are signing a talisman of a striker. When you look at Garnacho, there's a bit of a rough diamond in there. He's now what, 21? Has he turned 21? Still a very young player. So because and also there's a possibility of resale value on Garnacho. Let's say you sign Garnacho for 45 million pounds, and then you handle him well, and he does improve. He does live to his talent and expectations. In 2-3 years' time, he could be the next Akivica Kvaratskhelia that you're shipping out for 75 million euros or even more than that. So the possibility of a resale value on Alvaro Garnacho is higher as compared to that of Darwin Núñez. So you have Darwin Núñez, who is turned 26, put him on a 5-year contract, and if he sees that out, or in 4 years' time he's 30, he's turning 31. So all those are also factors that our clubs, factor in when they're signing these kinds of players. That's why young players are increasingly also becoming more expensive because of the resale value that clubs look at. Do you know why Victor Gyökeres has has 100 million euros clause in his contract, but Sporting Lisbon are willing to negotiate on that because they know for a fact that the player at 27 years of age coming from the Portuguese league is not going to be able to command that kind of fee, because the buying club will also look at it, is that what resale value do we have on here, because in 3 years' time he's going to be 30, so that is also part of consideration when these clubs are making those kinds of decisions to sign these players. So let's not rule that out entirely. Let's also look at it in that sort of breadth or with that kind of lens and say that's why Alejandro Garnacho that's why a club like Napoli could be willing to pay a little more for Garnacho than Darwin Núñez. Now, of course, the other argument on the other side could be to say that, look, in Darwin Núñez, you're getting a proven player that has been able to do it in Portugal, fairly done it in the Premier League, and yet you're betting on a youngster for whom it could fail. All transfers are bets. You can get a very good player from this league, and it just does not work out in your league. So we've also seen that happen one too many times. So when you look at Darwin Núñez's numbers, the only season he's posted, he scored more than 10 goals in a season. That was 2023-2024. He scored 11 goals and provided 8 assists, a 19-goal involvement. His debut campaign, he scored 9 and provided 3 assists. That was a 12-goal involvement. Last season, he only scored 5 in the Premier League and provided 2 assists. So on the backdrop of those numbers, I do not think Liverpool really have a huge leg to stand on to say, look, you're taking a striker in their prime who is banging in goals. If he had scored 15 or 17 goals in the calendar season, and I do not think that Liverpool would be even entertaining offers for him. You come back to say young players get higher price. Liverpool should offer Connor Doherty to Napoli for 60 million. At least Napoli gets a proper player. Now, unfortunately, it's not for Liverpool to determine what player Napoli should be pursuing. So Napoli have identified that we want a striker, and that striking target is going to be Darwin Núñez. So that's the player they will ask for. Sometimes during negotiations for that particular player, clubs may ask about the availability of other players, the way Arsenal did when they were pursuing Mikel Merino, and asked about the availability of Martin Zubimendi, and sort of had those discussions last summer. So Napoli could just come and say we want Darwin Nunes, but also have, let's say preliminary negotiations for a player like Harvey Elliott to say, how about Harvey Elliott? What if we are, to express interest? What if we are interested? How much could he go for? And they assess their situation. So it's not too far fetched for you to make that suggestion, but it's also not for Liverpool to make the suggestion to say, look, we also have this kind of player, uh, unless Napoli had a player that Liverpool were interested in, and they were discussing some form of, potential swap deal plus cash for Liverpool to say, look here, we are willing to give you Darwin Nunes for us to sign this star player of yours and give you a bit of extra cash. So unfortunately, that's not the situation that we are looking at in this particular case. But yeah, that's it at Liverpool. But rest assured, Liverpool are going to remain really, really active in the transfer window. Their primary target remains Hugo Ekitike, and as far as a striker is concerned. And I've told you for the wingers, do keep your eyes out on Rodrigo Goes as well as Anthony Gordon from Newcastle. Then quickly, in regards to the latest transfer gossip and speculation, Napoli are back in for Manchester United's Alejandro Garnacho. That's according to the Mirror, and they are willing to pay 45 million pounds. Now, remember, in January they were willing to pay still the same amount for the same player, only that United chose were reluctant. I think we were asking for up to 60 million pounds. So they chose not to, go beyond that. Then United also remain optimistic that they will agree a deal for Brani Mbeumo before their US tour. Now, remember the two sides, Brentford and Man United, are still apart in the valuation of the player. So, and this is partly what is frustrating. All right, apologies on that. Another internet glitch. We've experienced one too many of those in recent times. But thank you for those of you that do stick around. Sorry. So yeah, our internet is really, really been poor in the last 2 days or so. But thank you for sticking around. So, anyways, Arsenal continue with their negotiations with Sporting Lisbon for 27-year-old Victor Gyökeres. They are still apart in valuation. About 5 million euros apart in valuation. That's why some Arsenal fans are furious with the club. They're saying, just get on with it and sign the player, pay up the 5 million euros. Although I get the feeling that there's more to the story than just that. The Newcastle, who are completing the signing of Anthony Elanga, a player completed his medicals yesterday. But have rejected a bid from Leeds United to sign Sean Longstaff. Now, Sean Longstaff is a brother to Matthew Longstaff there. Then, and also, Tottenham Hotspurs have already agreed a deal with West Ham for the transfer of Mohammad Kudus for 55 million pounds in total. So remember, the first bid was about 50 million pounds. That was turned down by West Ham. Then Al Hilal is set to, make a dash for Benjamin Sesko. That's the 22-year-old Slovenian striker from RB Leipzig, whom Arsenal hold interest in, although they've since pivoted to Victor Gyökeres. But let's wait and see. The transfer window is far from done. In fact, we still have almost 2 months. Because we still have entire July and an entire August to go. Although majority of these big teams want to get deals done during preseason so that they can have those players try and fit in. And they do not want to have so many new players arriving at the tail end of the transfer window, which has been part of Manchester United's fans' criticism of their club. You say, I mean, why offer higher prices for average players but lowball Liverpool every time? Liverpool win the league but sell players for peanuts like some discount store. Really? Really zero? I do not want to believe that. I do not want to believe that. If there's any club that gets very rewarded when it comes to selling players, is Arsenal. They're just poor sellers, by the way. They're just poor sellers. When you look at Man United in recent times, have really, really not been the best of sellers. I'm not saying Liverpool have done significantly better, but let's look at what kinds of players have been leaving Liverpool in the last couple of years. Fabinho, Jordan Henderson, Sadio Mane, Firmino. I mean, I do not remember so many players, and I stand to be corrected or to even be reminded as zero on. Give me some 3, 4, 5 players that have left in their prime from Liverpool in recent times. They've just not left within their prime. Maybe Alexander Arnold, his contract had run out, but even be that as of it may, look, they negotiated perfectly well to get 10 million euros from Real Madrid just to allow Alexander Arnold be part of Real Madrid squad for the FIFA Club World Cup. Then they've just negotiated a deal worth 30 million pounds to let go of Terrell Quencher. That was quite impressive. 22 years of age, 30 million pounds for a German Bundesliga side, signing a centre back for 30 million pounds plus unexpected 5 million pounds in expected add-ons. Of course, they inserted in there a buyback clause that is believed to be around 60 million pounds, possibly rising to 70. Then the goalkeeper, Comain Kelleher, has just gone to Brentford for 18 million pounds. I think that's quite a decent fee for a backup goalkeeper. You know, that's quite a decent fee for a backup goalkeeper because Brentford had just lost Mark Flacken, who I was trying to recommend to clubs, not that were listening to me, but a very, very good goalkeeper for 10 million euros to Bayer Leverkusen, and they spent more to get the replacement. So really, now again, zero. You're saying 10 million pounds is 10 million is peanuts, but remember the player was going for free. If Real Madrid had made the decision to say, okay, let's just omit Alexander Trent-Arnold out of our FIFA Club World Cup, you wouldn't have gotten even the 10 million pounds. It's peanuts because if we were to put Alexander Trent-Arnold on the market to value him, he's definitely more than that. But you are going to lose him for free anyway. You get in just a couple of weeks' time. All Real Madrid needed to say, let's hold it out until the end of June, which was 2 weeks, by the way, into the tournament. And then they couldn't have you couldn't have gotten a penny. So I'm saying they negotiated a very good deal. Not that they were trying to sell the player, really. It was a negotiation for Liverpool to let the player out of his contract early enough for him to be able to play for Real Madrid. Then 18 million pounds for Kelleher. I mean, could he have cost more? Maybe, but let's not forget who was buying. It was Brentford. If let's say if it had been Chelsea that had come in for Kelleher, Liverpool would have demanded more because they know that Chelsea have a bigger budget or buying power as compared to a Brentford side. So there's also that in context. I mean, when it comes to selling players, there are things that you have to consider. First of all, the player. Now, two, who is buying? I'll give you an example. Denzel Dumfries has a 25 million euro release clause in his contract, which apparently expires on the 15th of July. Now, that 25 million release clause for the 29 years actually, is only available for clubs outside Italy. So if you're in Italy, then he's going to cost you more. Okay, clubs do these kinds of things. That if let's say, I'll tell you for a fact, if your club from Spain and you're trying to buy a player from the Premier League, it's going to cost more than if it was a Premier League team buying the same player from La Liga. Why? Because they know Premier League teams tend to have more money as compared to La Liga teams. It's equally a factor. So look at who Liverpool sold to, and at what price. So that is equally a factor. But I do not think that Liverpool have really been wrong in any case whatsoever. But again, it's only a difference of opinion. I'm not saying entirely that you're wrong. It's simply a difference of opinion. But that's how I would assess the situation. You say, okay, Kelleher 18. When he could fetch 50 to 60, I do not think Kelleher as a backup goalkeeper was capable fetching 50 to 60 million euros or even pounds for backup goalkeeper. Not in one bit. Look at your number one goalkeeper, Arsene Ramsey-Baker. How much did he cost from AS Roma? You know, he is the number one goalkeeper, and arguably he's been one of the best goalkeepers in the Premier League, if not in the world, in the last 4 or 5 years. You know, so you cannot put him at the same price level with Kelleher, really. So then you say you talk about question 30 million for an England international. You're saying is rubbish. You're saying is rubbish, but what you're ignoring is who was buying. If it was Bayern Munich that had come in for the request, I'm sure Liverpool would have demanded for more. You know, so do not forget who is buying. That is a factor as well. And then you say demand 100 million for selling him early. You think Kelleher was the second best goalkeeper in the league this season? That I do not contest that. In fact, I was having an engagement, with Chelsea fans, and I was telling them, look here, if you guys really need to improve your goalkeeping situation, there is a Liverpool backup goalkeeper in Kelleher who I believe is better than all the goalkeepers that you do have in your hands, you know, at the moment, based on what we've seen. But it was not Chelsea buy, it was Brentford buy, you know. It was Brentford buy. Look at Brentford. They want north of 65 million pounds for Brandon Mbeumo. But do you think Brentford are going to go and buy 60 million pound player? No, they're just not going to, because they'll tell you we can't afford it. Because it's not every day that those clubs get to sell a player of that value. You know, it's not every day that they make that kind of money. And besides, it's not money that they are receiving at a go. Maybe by the time it's all paid up, maybe they would have even been relegated. Who knows? So, you know, so demand 100 for signing him early. No, 100 is unreasonable. Swap for Rodrigo also works. Swapping Rodrigo with who? Who would you offer as part of a deal to swap for Rodrigo? Liverpool has always been the discount store for Europe since McManaman's free move to Real Madrid. Okay, when it comes to free moves, clubs don't have a say. Clubs do not have a say. I mean, look at it this way. Because once a player's contract is expired, he's free to speak to whoever. He no longer has allegiance to you. And by the way, clubs have tried to move on players with a year left to their contracts, and players refused to move. And they ended up losing them for free. That's just how it works. It's not that. Could you fault Liverpool for maybe failing to renew players' contracts on time? Maybe we could make that argument, because at some point last season, Liverpool were the verge of losing Alexander-Arnold, Virgil van Dijk, and Mo Salah in the same year, which could have been really bad for Liverpool. But would it have been the players' fault? No, it would have been the club's fault. You know, so when it comes to free transfers, I certainly do not think so. Exactly, that is what the problem is. Others buy from England for higher, but get from Liverpool for lower. No. Again, look at Scott McTominay to Napoli. How much did he cost? Not high. I can tell you for a fact that you remember when Arsenal expressed interest in signing Douglas Luiz? Aston Villa were valuing the player at anywhere between 50 to 70 million pounds. When Juventus came in, he went for 50 million euros, for which only 45 was the guaranteed, you know, and 5 unexpected add-ons, which I do not think, by the way, they would get unless it was tied to a number of games that he would eventually play for Juventus, because last season was a disaster for him. So, okay, it depends on who is buying and from where. Just imagine, let's say FC Porto came to sign Conor Bradley, and Bradley was interested in going to FC Porto, and Liverpool were open to sell it. Trust me, Porto are not going to pay the same amount than if Sunderland came in for him. Liverpool would ask for bigger transfer fees from Sunderland than they would of FC Porto. That's just the way it is, unfortunately. By the way, there's something called the English tax. I'm sure you've had something of that. the English tax. Man United, by the way, Manchester United fans keep complaining about the same. They feel that when they go to buy players, they are sold. They buy players quite expensively, and yet when it comes to them selling players, they do not sell them as expensively. It's just the story of Premier League clubs. Now, go sit and do this comparison. When a Premier League club is buying from a fair Premier League club, look at the valuation of those players. And then when a Premier League club is selling to a club outside the Premier League, go look at those figures. You'll come back and tell me. Then you say Alisson is the best keeper in the league. So if you think Alisson is the best goalkeeper in the league, if a club came to, we know Galatasaray had expressed some form of interest for him. How much would he go for? Alisson Ramses Baker. How much would he go for? And trust me, you're not going to sell him for as much as you bought him. That I can guarantee you, unless you're selling him to the Saudi Pro League. So you say yes, Brentford can buy a cheap, sell dear, but Liverpool is the other way around. Okay, Brentford, look at Brentford the same way you look at teams like Brighton. Brighton bought João Pedro in 2023 from Watford. That deal was worth about £30 million. They just sent him to Chelsea for 60, which is 55 guaranteed and £5 million in expected add-ons. Alisson minimum 90. You see, but you're not going to get that. You're not going to get 90. Not even if you're selling to Real Madrid. Not even if you are to sell to Barcelona. Not even if you are to sell to Juventus. Not even if you are selling to Chelsea. You're not going to get 90. Not even if it were Man City. You're not going to get 90. Remember, the most expensive goalkeeper was Kepa Arrizabalaga in 2018. Cost Chelsea £72 million. He's only gone for 5. Now, you can fault Chelsea for whichever way you want to slice that conversation, but he is the most expensive goalkeeper that we've ever had, So, and go and try by Unai Simon. Joan Garcia, the best goalkeeper in the Spanish La Liga last season, he went for 25 from Barcelona, from Espanyol to Barcelona. So there's also that. So again, transfers do not work in isolation, by the way. The valuation of players has an interconnection around the major leagues as well. Because let's say Joan Garcia is going for 25 and he's been the best goalkeeper in the Spanish La Liga. You think a Premier League club is going to go to Atletico Bilbao, want to sign Unai Simon, and they are going to be willing to pay £80 million for him? No, they will not. They will not. So unless it will be blind faith. So even equally, Brentford sign players are quite cheaply, and also sell them expensively because they sign these players as unknowns from small clubs, and then suddenly big clubs come and are interested. Let me give you another example. Ola Aina at Nottingham Forest, he just renewed his contract. He just renewed it by 3 years. If today you wanted to go to Nottingham Forest and ask to buy Ola Aina, you're going to spend no less than £25 million, and yet they got him as a free agent. So there's that, Then you say McTominay going for 25 is high for a very average player. Now you're saying Scott McTominay was sold expensively, That's what you're saying. I do not think that was expensive. I do not think that was expensive. I do not know. You forget that in Erik ten Hag's second season, I think either the second season or the first season, Scott McTominay was one of the highest goal scoring players in that Manchester United side, And in fact, when Thingy was speaking about the situation, Origana Solskjaer, he was saying that it was a blunder for Manchester United to let go of the player, Yes, that was in 2023-2024. Scott McTominay scored 7 Premier League goals and provided 1 assist. Arguably his best season in a Manchester United jersey, So really, that was his final season at Man United, and that was him in his prime, before he went on to Napoli. So he should have even cost more, but because Man United were selling to Napoli and not Liverpool or not Arsenal, not Tottenham, he went for that. You remember, actually, West Ham, when trying to negotiate a deal for Scott McTominay, and Man United were demanding for north of 30 million pounds, you know. So that's a prime example of what we're trying to justify here. Then you say English tax applies to every club except Liverpool. No, I'm not saying it applies to every club. No, the English tax, by the way, is predominantly with English players. I'll give you an example of when you're buying an English player. Is, for example, I'll use the example of Joel Quensha because he's an Englishman. If, let's say, Man United had identified him, of course, okay, Man United, your rivals, okay, let's say Everton. In fact, there is a youngster at Liverpool that Everton are interested in. His name eludes me, but if you can remember it, kindly put it for me down in the comment section. Liverpool are asking for 30 million pounds. Why? Because it is Everton asking to buy. First of all, Everton is a rival. That's for sure. It is a huge factor in that, but also it is a Premier League club buying, you know. So there's that. That's a perfect example. Where is Quensha's English tax? Again, the English tax factors in if you're buying an English player from an English Premier League club. That's when you get that English tax. That's when you're going to pay for it, you know. Let me ask, do you agree that Jack Grealish was worth 100 million pounds from Aston Villa to Manchester City? Do you agree he was worth that? Do you agree that Harry Maguire was worth 85 million pounds from Leicester City to Man United? Personally, I do not agree with those valuations, but they were that. That's what they paid to get those players. That's what those clubs paid to get those players, you know. So both English players, so the English tax kicked in. And then you say Liverpool is still selling players for Wales. I do not disagree with you on that. Again, it's a problem that majority of big clubs, I think, have had over the last couple of years, Arsenal inclusive, Man United inclusive. Now, tell me, besides Chelsea, who sold Kai Havertz to Arsenal for 65 million pounds, and because he was going to Arsenal from a Premier League club to a Premier League club, from a rival club to another rival, tell me which out of the big clubs, you know, in England, in Tottenham inclusive, have sold a player for that high a fee within the Premier League. Harry Kane is the other exception. He went to Bayern Munich for what, 100 million euros? Now, tell me another one. There's not many. There's not many. You forget Jorginho cost 12 million pounds from Chelsea. Now, if on another day, if it had been Flamingo that had come in for Jorginho, I'm sure he would have gone for even 8 at the same time. So that's a factor. Then we are taking pity on the poor clubs, even if it means damaging the club's finances. I do not think it's taking pity on smaller clubs. Again, this has to do with hierarchy. For example, let's be honest, Liverpool is a richer club than Everton. Liverpool is a richer club than Leeds United, than Brentford, than AFC Bournemouth, than Burnley. So essentially, if Liverpool is going to go to Bournemouth and say, we want to, if Liverpool is going to go, let's say, to a club like Southampton and say, we want to buy Tyler Dibble, Southampton are going to say, you'll pay us 40 million pounds or north of that, because it's Liverpool. They are big, they have the money. But if the roles were reversed and Southampton are trying to sign Tyler Dibble from Liverpool are not going to demand for 40 million pounds because it will be unrealistic. It will be a slam in the face. And basically, they won't get to move on the player if the interest is there for them to move on the player. Basically, that's just about it. Then McTominay was average when he moved to Napoli. Man United fans were overjoyed. The club robbed Napoli blind. Well, what's the value of Scott McTominay now? What's his value if you went and tried to sign him in case he were open to even leaving? Napoli are not going to ask for anything less than 50 million pounds. So that means they would have would made a 50% profit or even more. Then Elliott should go for 90. Then again, he's not going to go for 90. Not in a million years. Is he a good player? Very, 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 very decent player. I look at what he's been able to do with the English. Apologies, my internet was acting up again, but I think we need to wrap this one up before internet chooses to betray us entirely. But yeah, is Harvey Elliott a good player? Without a doubt. But let's be honest, he's not going to go for that fee. If you're Liverpool, would you buy Harvey Elliott for 90 million pounds? No. I'll give you another example. Morgan Rogers from Aston Villa is one of those players that are being monitored by the big clubs in the Premier League. But after 1.5 seasons at Aston Villa, having bought him for about 12 to 15 million pounds, apparently the valuation is anywhere between 70 and 90. But do you believe he's worth that? Definitely not. He's not worth that. Antoine Semenyo, who just renewed his contract at AFC Bournemouth, they signed him from Bristol City in, I think, around 2023 for about, was it 11 something million pounds? But today, they were telling Tottenham Hotspurs that if you're interested in signing Antoine Semenyo, it's going to cost you 70 million pounds. Is he worth that? Definitely not. So there's an overvaluation of players, but also that overvaluation is dependent on who is buying. If it were Nottingham Forest buying him, they wouldn't be quoting those figures. Trust me, they wouldn't be quoting those figures. Then you say richer clubs should give concessions. Richer club should give concessions to poor clubs. If they cannot pay up, then do not buy. They do that to richer clubs too. Yes, I would, if English tax really exists. Again, if, okay, let's say Liverpool were buying Javier from what? From what? Give me an example of one club where you'll be buying him, and I'll give you what the valuation will be. You know, Elliott for 50 is so cheap. If Brighton or West Ham cannot afford, then do not buy. Again, you're saying that, but it goes back to Liverpool to say, do we need this money? Because remember, as big clubs spend, they have books to balance in terms of revenue generated, and that revenue comes from match day tickets. It comes from player sales. It comes from all other commercials. So it's not like big clubs are going to stick it out and keep all sorts of players on their books who they are paying wages, and simply because, you know, they stuck to their guns, or when they are overvalued, or they've set a value that buyers cannot meet. We've seen those things happen where you overvalue a player and he ends up staying. And you remember, the perfect example I can give you is, you remember Tottenham tried to sign Saido Berahino from West Bromwich Albion. West Bromwich Albion overvalued the player. They stayed with the player. They ended up getting nothing for him. So you can have that kind of situation happen to you as well, you know. And then you also have the habit now of players running down their contracts and walk away for free, because when they wanted to move, you overvalued them and they ended up not getting the move. So there's that as well, you know. So take, for example, take an example. If, let's say, William Saliba were to tell Arsenal that I would really love to go and join Real Madrid, and next summer, when he only has 1 year left to his contract, and Arsenal were to tell Real Madrid it's 150 million pounds, or we are not negotiating, the player will simply think, maybe 100 million pounds would have been reasonable for the club to get something out of me. But if it's coming down to that, I'll just see out the remainder of my contract and walk away for free. So all those are factors. All those are factors that you ought to, add into this thing. But I keep referring to, Brighton and Hove Albion. They've been good at doing this. They've been buying players on a relatively cheap and selling them quite expensively. But look at Liverpool. For how much you paid for Alexis McAllister. If a club came today to sign Alexis McAllister, let's say a club like Barcelona, Real Madrid, do you think, aren't you going to make a profit on him? He's a perfect example of a player on whom you could make a profit on. Having bought him from Brighton for what? Was it about 42 million pounds? Please correct me if I'm wrong on that. But I mean, it wasn't more than 50, that we know for a fact. So, but his value has gone up by the virtue of playing at Liverpool and continuing to show his, what he's capable of. Look at Enzo Fernandez. At the end of last season, if you wanted to buy Enzo Fernandez from Chelsea were bound to make a loss after paying 121 million euros to Benfica to sign him in January 2023, and yet after this concluded season, his value is relatively at what Chelsea paid for him, or even slightly above. So there's that. So it's not like big teams are incapable of making profits on players. They are really, really capable of doing that. But it depends. How much did you buy the player, and has he gained value? Now, Darwin Núñez, has he gained value ever since Liverpool signed him in 2022? No, his value has gone down because he's not been posting the numbers that were expected of him. If he was posting about Erling Haaland, Manchester City got him for 52 million pounds from Borussia Dortmund. We all know that was practically a steal. Today, go and try and sign him for Man City. How much is he going to go for? Anything less than 100 million pounds would be an absolute steal. Even if it were 100 million pounds, it would be a steal because Florian Wirtz just went for 100. So that is equally a factor. So what are you saying is wrong? Liverpool should sell players for what they are worth, but other clubs are just bullying them into giving them discount coupons. No, that's not what I'm saying. Okay, here, take this example. Let's use the example of people. You have 4 rich people in your community and 2 relatively poor people, or not as rich as the other 4. Now, you have a plot of land or a house that you want to sell, and one of the poor people wants to buy that land. Wants to buy that house. Maybe let's say at 200,000 pounds, and you are willing to sell. So you're going to tell the poor guy, look, the house is 200,000 pounds, and then the poor guy is going to be like, I have 150,000 pounds, and you'll negotiate and say, okay, 195,000 pounds is what I'll do for this house. So I'll give you, that's my final fee. But if a very rich man from the same community came to you, you would say the house is possibly 400,000 pounds. That's basically the analogy I'm trying to explain. So that it depends on who is buying from Liverpool. If Bayern Munich were the one buying Jerry Kosher, I'm sure it would have cost more than 30 million pounds if Bayern Munich were committed to paying that. But because it's Bayer Leverkusen, who we all know are not as big a club as Bayern Munich, he went for that. Borussia Dortmund over the years have bought players cheaply and sold them expensively. Ousmane Dembele brought Erling Haaland, Jamie Gittens, Jude Bellingham. They've just bought Jude Bellingham for a fee of about 33 million euros. And watch the space. In 2-3 years' time, he could go for significantly more than that, because bigger teams that are bigger than BVB will be the ones buying. But if it is going to be a club like, let's say, Cologne or Stuttgart coming to BVB to say, I want Jude Bellingham, he's going to cost less. That's just basically the way it is. That's the nature of economics and society. So it's not that Liverpool are choosing to sell cheaply. It is on to whom they are selling and their willingness to sell, and also their own valuation, of those players. Because we could be sitting here and arguing that Liverpool are selling players on the cheap, yet Liverpool are satisfied with the valuation of those players. You between you and I could disagree that maybe Liverpool is selling them cheaply, and yet they believe that's the valuation of those players. Basically, it could be that, you know. So let's not forget that. We could say Harvey Elliott is worth 90 million pounds when to Liverpool is worth 50, you know, and that's the valuation of the player. So let's not also forget that. Okay, I think I've read that comment. You say there is no overvalue. The prices Liverpool are selling are undervalued. Okay, it's just one man's opinion. That's your own opinion of Liverpool's value of players. Then you say Chelsea will demand 200 for Enzo because he's now improving. He's posting the numbers, and his overall game is advancing. And Moises Caicedo, is he worth 115 million pounds? Definitely not. Definitely not. But Chelsea agreed to pay that. Liverpool were willing to pay 100 million pounds for Moises Caicedo from Brighton. But because Brighton, that's the price they set, and the big clubs that wanted to buy him agreed to pay that. So you cannot accuse Brighton for overvaluing a player that the big clubs who want him are willing to pay. You cannot really fault Brighton for that. You can only fault Chelsea or Liverpool in that case to say, why are you overpaying for that player? But again, Chelsea will tell you, we think he's that worth, to us who want him and what we know we are capable of getting him, he's worth that. And then you say, you add on to say Liverpool cannot even swap a player similar in value with Osimhen without adding Chiesa and another 17 million pounds. That is an insult. Now, okay, Liverpool paid 12 million pounds for Federico Chiesa. Today he's worth what? I don't even know, because he played a whole lot of games. He's an injury-prone player who has not played a whole lot of games. So if you were to look at his statistics, they're not any promising. So it would be a huge gamble for a buying club as well. So if you are to offer him to Napoli as part of a swap deal for Victor Osimhen, the best you can do is say we value Federico Chiesa at 25 million euros, which Napoli probably would disagree, and then you would say that means if Osimhen is going for 75 as his release clause, so that means we are only paying you 50 million euros because we've already offset the 25 with the valuation of Federico Chiesa. So those are also dependent variables. Then, by your example, Liverpool will sell the house of 10% off if it's worth so the poor can buy, when they should actually sell for what it is worth. If the poor cannot buy, then do not buy. Now, exactly, yes, exactly, that's what I said. Now, I started by saying, if Liverpool is willing to sell and wants to sell, that's a primary factor, because for a transaction to be complete, there must be a willing buyer and a willing seller. There must be a willing buyer and a willing seller. So if there is a willing buyer and there is no willing seller, the transaction cannot happen. Those are the principles of the economics. So if we have those two, then we go to the negotiation of terms and valuation. You can overvalue an item. You can also undervalue an item. It depends on what you want to achieve. Now, in this case, what usually happens is that the seller has their value of the product, and the buyer also have a certain value they attach to a product, because unfortunately, players who do not have release clauses in their contracts are usually open for negotiations, or even those that have release clauses are open for negotiations, So precisely, Liverpool in this particular case would be saying, we are, for starters, they would say, we are willing to sell. That's for starters. Two, there is a willing buyer. Now, Liverpool would say, in our assessment, the value for this house is 200,000 pounds. Now, the buyer is saying, my valuation of your property is 150,000 pounds. Now, because the two are willing to do business, that's when they get to the negotiating table. And that's why it's not as simple as saying it's either 20 million pounds or nothing. You can't say that, but for as long as you're willing to sit on the table and negotiate, that means you're either willing to lower your price and the buyer is also willing maybe to improve on their offer, and until you reach an agreement. What does an agreement mean? An agreement means that both parties involved in the transaction are satisfied with the value. Again, you and I, as fans, we could disagree on the valuation. For example, if I'm Sunderland and you're Liverpool and I'm a Sunderland fan, let's say, I would say, I think we are overpaying for, let's say, Harvey Elliott, if we are buying him for 45 million pounds. And yet, you, the other side, a Liverpool fan, you're saying, oh, Sunderland robbed us because they paid 45 for Harvey Elliott. But is it Sunderland's fault? No, you're definitely going to fault Liverpool to say, I think we undervalued our player. But Liverpool, as a club, would have been satisfied with the transaction, and Sunderland would have been satisfied to say we've met, I think we paid what we ought to have promised for the value we attach to the player, and Liverpool will be satisfied that I think we've gotten what the value that we obviously attached to the player. And the reason as why you have that room is because it's not cast in stone. Why? Because if, let's say, Liverpool value the player at 50 million pounds, if a team comes and they're offering 20, they're not going to entertain negotiations, really, because that's below even half of the value of the player. But if a club comes and the value is at 50 and the club comes at 40, they could entertain negotiations. They could also say, no, at that fee, we're not willing to negotiate. It's either 50 or nothing. Then the other club would come back and say, okay, we'll make it 45 and maybe 5 in expected add-ons. And then Liverpool will say, okay, now we are willing to start listening. And then they negotiate and maybe they land at 48.5 as the guaranteed fees plus 2.5 or 1.5 in expected add-ons. It's basically simply that. It's not that Liverpool get robbed in the process as though they were not at the negotiating table. So precisely that is why I said that Liverpool both are such poor negotiators. Well, that's your assessment of them. I think I would say the same for Arsenal's negotiators. I think oftentimes they've let go players on the cheap. Look at Emily Smith-Rowe going to Fulham. Look at they failed to move on a player like Wes Nelson over the years. Look at Eddie Nketiah to Crystal Palace. Look at Florian Balogun to Monaco. And things of that nature, really. So I would equally say that my club, Arsenal, are poor negotiators. They are okay with that cheap prices if it means balancing the books. Well, yeah, it boils down to balancing the books because at the end of the day, when the profit and sustainability rules come knocking at their door, or the UEFA's financial fair play rules, we as fans will only take a back seat and ask, what were you guys doing? Why did you make sure you stayed on the right side of the law if it meant a points deduction? Just imagine in 2-3 years' time, Liverpool are facing a potential points deduction while they are trying to pursue a Premier League title just because their profit and sustainability rules were not met because they couldn't bring money in comparison to what they would have spent. We all know that Liverpool have spent quite significantly already in this transfer window, and they are looking to spend more. 100 for Florian Wirtz, probably about 40 for Milos Kakez, and then 35 for Jeremy Frimpong, and they're looking to do more. But also, let's not forget, Liverpool didn't spend that much the previous summer. They didn't spend anything in January. Last summer, they spent on Mamadashvili from Sevilla and left him out there on loan, and also on Federico Chiesa. So, in that kind of breadth. So, anyways, it's been a fruitful conversation to have with you, Zero, and everybody else that joined us for the course of this broadcast. Cristiano, Sam, all those that like the broadcast, all those that watched but did not submit a comment or did not leave a like on the broadcast, I still do not take you for granted. I do appreciate the time you have dedicated to being with us here this morning. It's been 1 hour and 21 minutes of doing this with you. Allow me to wish you a wonderful rest of the day. Thank you so much, Zero, for this fruitful engagement, for your submissions and the challenges you offered in our debate. So Thank you for all the time you dedicated to be with us this morning. Have yourselves a wonderful rest of the day, and I'll see you guys next time, perhaps later tonight. It's been a pleasure. Bye bye.